right, so we can keep on schedule. We're going to go ahead and get this panel started. Again, this is the Ask the Agent panel, and I am joined by 3 of the agents who have joined us this weekend. I have Nicole Payne, who is here from Cots Literary. We have Erin, Clyburn, who is here with Howland Literary. Did I say that right, Howland? Okay. And we have Michelle Jackson, who is joining us from LCS Literary. And if you want more information about each of these wonderful agents, then please consult the program, or you can find on the website on the one-on-one pages, there's information on there of what they do and what they're looking for as agents. But this session is for you. Not that any of them aren't, but we want you to be able to have every opportunity to learn from agents directly, whether it's through the mentoring session or whether it's in a panel like this. So please have your questions ready. Get your hand up so I can see you well, and I'll repeat your question. Make sure everybody knows what the question is. But I do want to lead with just a general question of it's kind of a what does a literary agent do? But I also would love to hear what you love most about what you do. And we're just going to start here and move down.
Hi everyone. I consider a literary agent as a bridge, someone who can help an author get their book published and get their book in front of a publisher and bring it into the world. That's the thing I love most about being an agent, is seeing like what before it's just like your book baby and now out into the world and everybody can see it and enjoy it. Sorry, I'm a little groggy.
Yeah, I like a bridge. We do so many things, honestly. Like a day might be working on edits, it might be negotiating a contract, it might be going through that contract and redlining it and talking to publishers, it might be having calls with editors. It might be having like strategy calls with marketing teams. It can be so many things, and then there's a lot of things that like I never would have anticipated, like being a therapist to clients when things aren't going well, which is a huge part of our job to the point that my boss always says that she thinks that agents should have psychology degrees before anything else, and I think that's actually accurate because that's a large part of the job. My favorite thing, I think, is working with debut authors and then seeing how their career develops. So like after the first book, like seeing them work on a second book and seeing what kind of readership they develop and how their style grows and changes. I just think that's one of the coolest things, to go from working with an author who like all they have is a manuscript to like seeing someone with this like great catalog and readership.
I'll echo a lot of what Nicole and Erin said. My favorite part of agenting is definitely working with the authors. I enjoy that relationship, building the relationship, talking about the goals. What is it that you see yourself doing? Sometimes as an agent, though, I think exactly what you said, which is, you know, it's because I understand being an author myself, the feeling of coming really close to getting acquisition and then maybe hearing it's passed and having to be that middle person that, you know, when you're the agent, you're the one that takes that good news, bad news, or whatever you want to call it, to the authors. And so, but because I work on developing those relationships, it's something that I get to do and prepare them ahead of time of how grueling the process can be. And so I'm always encouraging them to keep writing, and I like that. I like when we have those creative conversations of what are you working on and how can I help. So those are the parts that I really enjoy so far about agenting. Another thing that we do is, you know, we are the person that if an author has a situation like a cover or, you know, something that they got wrong, yeah, we spare you having to do that. We're the one that have to bear that brunt. So this is some of what we do as agents.
Got a question right back here.
I already asked Michelle this to some extent, but I self-published a memoir that came out August 1st, and I have a sequel in mind. So how many sales would I have to have? I have about 550 on my subscriber list. Now how many would have to be on my platform before an agent and a publisher would consider doing a sequel?
So the question is from Anna, and she self-published a memoir and was curious in working on her second one, what kind of sales she would have to get on her first one to be of interest to agents or publishers.
That is a tough, admittedly, situation. Like, just to be totally candid, a lot of agents, myself included, don't work on books that have already been self-published. And if you have a sequel to a memoir, I'm assuming, unless it can stand alone, that you would also need to have the first one traditionally published again, like in addition to that. Unless you can make the second book, instead of a sequel, it's just a standalone book. The memoir market is really tough. I talked to a couple of people about this yesterday. I have represented memoir for a few years and have, over the past few years, it's gotten increasingly hard to the point that someone either needs basically to come in with a huge readership, like huge, or to have a voice and story that is like so singular that you can't really compare it to a lot of things that are already out there on the market, or to be a celebrity. Basically, it's really tough. And so I think that what I would probably say is your best bet would be to see if you can have this project stand alone, and because I think pitching it as a sequel to a book that's self-published is going to be really hard.
Journey?
So what if, kind of building on that, what if it's a book that's kind of like in the same fictional setting as the previous book, but isn't necessarily a sequel? Like it kind of like has some of the same character names or same like sort of setting or location names, but it isn't a direct sequel, like, which kind of, you know, there's like a lot of fantasy universes out there that does this. How would that apply in that case?
So Journey's question is following up on Anna's, but talking about fiction, and if one book to the other contains the same world and characters, but it's pretty much a standalone, right? Correct?
Correct.
Then would that apply to the same answer, I guess?
I would say yes. I would try to pitch it as a standalone. And depending on how that first book did for you, like sales-wise, I would say that's up to you whether you even want to mention it or not. If it did really great and you have a big following, you know, feel free to like mention that. But if not, I would just pitch it as a brand new thing.
I actually want to build on that question a little bit more because I've never had something traditionally published before. So if you were to get a book in like a fictional setting published, does the publisher typically own all the rights to the future works in that setting?
Okay, so following up, Journey has a question. It's a rights question. Yeah, it's a rights question, just asking what rights the publishers retain to books that would be in the future of that world, future books of that world, or relating to those characters.
Generally, yes. Like, not that they own your like IP altogether, but they will have the first right to like a sequel in that same series. Like, you wouldn't be able to go shop a sequel at another publisher, and you wouldn't be able to like self-publish it unless they had already had a chance to look at it.
And this would traditionally be in your publishing contract, which is an option for the publisher to purchase the next book. They first right of refusal, and if they refuse it, then you would be able to move on to somebody else and have them publish it, but they would have the first go at it. I know I saw another hand up. There's one in the back.
Okay. So I would like a real feel for this. I have like a general sense, but you write a book and like you'd like people to read it and say it's really awesome, let's say fiction, and you guys love it and you pitch it to publishers. What happens after that as far as like getting people to read it? Is it, because what I'm getting the sense of from my dad is that it's like pretty much a full-time job, you know, you have to advertise a lot and find ways to get out there and stuff, and that's all on you.
Okay. So yeah, this is a question related to once you have acquired an author, or you're working with an author and you're pitching to editors, what is that process like? I mean, how much work do you have to put into contacting people and getting the manuscript read?
It is basically a full-time job. There are some publishers that will help with marketing, but there are a lot that won't, and it's up to you to be able to put yourself out there and make yourself known. So yeah, it is important that you make your brand and put yourself out there and be able to just like have people to be able to read it, because the more people see it, the more sales you'll get.
How difficult is it to get editors to read manuscripts that you pitch? Very difficult.
Yeah, I only just started as an agent sending out my own clients' projects a few months before the pandemic started, and before the pandemic, I got super quick reads. Everyone would get back to me within like a couple of weeks. Everyone would respond to my emails. It was a different world. Basically since then, and then with the addition of like the consolidation of publishing houses and layoffs and people resigning, people are stretched really thin right now. Like editors are stretched very thin. It's a lot harder to get a response on anything, much less have someone like read the manuscript. Even just like getting a response to an email that says like, I received your manuscript is hard. It's a very, I'm hoping that, this is a tough time that we're going to like get out of. I really hope things get better from here. I think they will. But right now is a particularly hard time to have things on submission. Like, whereas I used to hear back from editors within probably 2 or 3 months if they had a manuscript of mine, now it could be 6 months, 9 months. It could be a long time, if at all.
And I was going to say that just as it's pretty much almost the same as with your querying journey. Let's say for argument's sake you queried 15 agents and you might hear back a response from 7 or 8, right? It's pretty much the same thing, I think, right now in the editing world. So we pitch to the editors, and you have many that still respond and say, I'll get back to you, but then you might never hear from them again. And it's nothing against them, it's just how swamped they are. And this is a conversation that we were having together as well, which was that a lot of things have shifted and changed, and one of them is the expectation of the manuscript that they're getting. So I mean, we will say as close to publisher ready as possible, but it's almost, I don't even know if there's such a thing as perfect, but it's almost as if the expectation is even from a debut author, almost like almost perfect manuscript, because sometimes the things that they pass for are just might seem minor, but they have maybe a good chunk of manuscripts before them. So the key is not to give them a reason to stop reading, and that's what I tell my authors. We're going to keep going at this, and you have to be willing to revise, and what we share we share any comments that they may make, and take out what we can to see if there's anything here that we can use to further revise the manuscript. So it's just a constant learning process both ways.
So we got one question down here.
So, going off of her question, how important is it to have like a social media presence when you're pitching? Like, do I already need to have something in place for you to consider anything else?
So it's a platform question of social media. Like how much does it influence the decision making, whether it's you to represent the author or an editor to purchase the manuscript? Is there some type of threshold, or does it matter if you're active or not?
So I'll start off. For me personally, I'm looking at the premise and I'm looking at the manuscript. That's where I start off. Because authors are at different levels of social media platform. We do talk about that afterwards, but the very first thing for me is, if I have, I'll say it this way, if I have a great premise, great writing, great manuscript, then I'm going to be talking to you about building a social media presence, you know. I'm not going to say no to you if you have none and I have a great product in my hand. That's me personally. But this is the world that we live in. I remember a reader once saying to me, I'm not going to buy from you if I don't know you. And that's how the readers are. This is the world, the readership. So I have had I have had a particular deal that did not pass the editorial board because of social media. And even though the editor and myself urged the author, get on, start, so that, you know, this just wasn't her thing. And so it is important, but as far as that first step for me personally, I want a good product. That's what I'm most interested in first.
Yeah, to add on to what Michelle said, I agree that for me, I prefer like the writing be good, but I have spoken to editors and some have said that they do want a social media presence, so I believe it doesn't hurt to have that. But there are some that will take an author that doesn't have a website or even social media. So it just depends, and that's the thing with this industry, it's very subjective. So what worked for one editor might not work for another, just like what works for one agent doesn't always work for another.
Yes.
I would add that it makes a big difference whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction. If you're writing nonfiction, if you don't have a platform, it's pretty much a no-go. Whether that platform be social media or a readership that you have from some other, like, if you publish a lot of journal articles, or if you have, I'm trying to think of other other nonfiction things. If you have a readership, like a proven readership, that's the most important thing. But if you have no platform at all, nonfiction is pretty much impossible. For fiction, I've sold projects to editors for clients who had no social media. The expectation is that they will always get on social media at that point. Some publishers even try to put that in a contract, that like the author will like tweet about their book X amount of times. Like it can get kind of crazy and granular in that way. But for me, it's not a deal breaker at all on the fiction side if someone is not active on social media.
I'm glad you clarified that with the nonfiction piece, because that is true. I will add though, in the fiction side, what I have noticed is that if you have published before, there is some expectation that you have done some kind of marketing. So, because, for example, if you've self-published, and then you're trying to get another book traditionally published, the expectation is that maybe you have, it's not even that you're on every single platform because they grow by the hour, but it's more like, which one are you on and are you trying to cultivate something there? So it's more effort. So I will add that piece that when I said no platform, etc., I'm talking more the debut author. But if you have previously published, we would expect that. And some of the marketing could be I attended the Broadleaf Writers Conference. I have a critique group. Things like that is what we're looking for as an author.
And just to kind of add to that, because I definitely have this question a lot. There's a lot of frustration, and I hear a lot of frustration about how much marketing falls onto the author. But you have to remember that you go into this as a business. Like, you are a business of you, and so therefore you have a brand, and it's important upon you to reflect that brand to your potential customers. And whether that's brand is aspiring writer who wants to be published, or whether that's I just got a publishing deal, or I have books on the shelf, it is on you to maintain your brand, because as Michelle said, people will buy the book based on the author. They will buy it based on the brand of that person, or they will not buy the book based on that person.
Yes.
So it's always important to market yourself from a branding standpoint. Journey was that, and then we'll come back over to Shane.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the editor questions from previously. So would you all as agents prefer it if writers go through an independent editor to just make sure the manuscript is as perfect as it can be before you ever see the manuscript?
So it's an editing question, and the question is, should the writer go through an editor before you see the book? And I'll even follow up with that with, like, how much editing do you do with your clients?
I personally do not care if it's been professionally edited or if you used a critique group, or as long as it's polished. That is the main thing for me. So whether you want to spend money and get an editor to look over your book, or if you just have a community that will actually look over it, that's, as long as what I get is polished, that's all I care about.
How much editing do you do with your clients?
How much editing I do, it depends. When I started off, I was much more editorial, but now that I've been in the industry a lot more, I prefer my clients to, when they send me like their next book and their next book, to have it, polished, and then I will go over it and give them any editorial notes that I have. But I expect you to put in the work before you send it to me.
I am the same way with editing. I expect a client to have at least had like some feedback from beta readers or critique partners before it comes to me. Like, I don't want to see a first draft. Also, like Nicole was saying, it was a lot easier when I was like brand new and only had one client to like spend so much time with them. But I just can't do that anymore. I do edit pretty heavily though. My background is in like editing and copy editing and developmental editing, so all of that is very important to me. I always do at least one developmental edit round and one copy edit round before I send something out on submission. But as far as hiring an editor, one of my favorite things about writing is that you don't have to spend any money to do it if you don't want to. If you have the money to spend on resources like conferences and freelance editors and all of that, that's wonderful, but I love that you don't have to and that you can still just have equal standing in someone's query box. So for me, like Nicole said, it's way more important that it's just as polished as you can get it, as opposed to that, like, if I see that someone has hired a freelance editor in a query letter, it doesn't make me any more or less interested in the manuscript.
And I feel the same. I have a strong editorial background, developmental editing, content editing, and I was doing a lot more, but I have found that I had to step back a little bit because I couldn't handle the workload, and I cannot be the first person. So I've definitely suggested my clients, work with your alpha readers, work with your beta readers, work with your critique partners, and get it as best as possible. And what that means is, I've seen things come across with, there's things that you can handle as an author. For example, punctuation, etc. So I don't want to see that as much. We're all human. There's no perfect book, but you know, as much as possible, polished as possible, because this is a profession, and I want us to maintain that professionalism always. With that being said, there are times where some of my clients will say, I'll go work with an editor, and I say, well, before you do, try this strategy. These are the questions you need to ask after every chapter. It's almost, this is going into my education background, a purpose for reading every time. And it is, this time when I'm reading, this is what I need you to look at. This time when you're reading, this is what I need you to look at. So you can do some of that yourself, because as Erin said, this is something that you can do. After a while, it is hard for you to get to be really subjective about your own work, and that's where honest critique partners are important. And so I usually do tell my clients, please, it sounds terrible, but it's true. Please don't say my mom, my auntie, because I said they did not finish reading your manuscript. Right? They're going to just tell you they loved it. So you have to get someone that is about writing the way that you are. You know, that feel the same about writing the way that you do, and you know, chunk it together to get through your manuscript.
Shane.
Yeah, my question is, could you guys just break down what is a query letter and what advice do you have for writing a good query letter? Because I feel completely in the black about that.
Okay, so this question is on query letters. So what is a query letter, and how do we write them? It's just a small question.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I do whole like workshops specifically on like putting together a great query letter. But I think that for me, what I like to see, just super generally speaking, is like all the metadata. So your title, your word count, your audience, your genre, all the things that we need to know about, like, where does this book sit on a shelf in a bookstore. And then I want to see a paragraph or two that is your pitch for your book. So it needs to have the stakes. So like you need to set up like the who, what, where, when. You need to tell us very succinctly what is the external and internal like journey that your protagonist is going on, for fiction obviously. And a short bio. I always like to see, even if you don't have any credentials, totally fine, just to be like, you know, I remember one of my clients who submitted to me, like, their bio was literally just like, so-and-so is a software engineer who lives in this city. Like, that was it. That's fine. But just to know, like, who are you, where are you, those are the main things that I look for, that I want to see. Oh, and I do also really enjoy seeing comp titles. You know, it's not a deal breaker, but I really love seeing if you can say, like, my book has elements of this book and this book, or it could sit alongside, you know, these books in conversation. I think that can also be really helpful, and it shows me that the author really knows about the market that they're writing in.
Yeah. I will add that comp titles, you want to make them recent as possible. Now, of course, if you tell me Beauty and the Beast or something like that, I'm game, I'm with you. But like, I'm talking more recent titles, because that shows that you're also reading, okay, and you're also on top of what's going on. I will add about the query letter. Think about it as, particularly for fiction, think about it as the back of a book. What is it that you read on the back of a book, the blurb on the back of a book, that makes you want to read that book? And that's how you would craft that section of the query letter. And that's what we mean when we say this is a great premise, because it's like, ooh, I want to read this. So, you know, we've heard it all before, but there's something that you mentioned there that goes, oh, I need to, and that's what we need to, that's what you kind of put in your query letter as well. So I think that's the basics of a query letter. And you can also say, "Dear Michelle."
You want to know that they actually know who they're querying? Does that help?
It's not a deal breaker, but it's nice.
I will also actually from Latoya, who
Yes.
is LCS Literary. Latoya told me recently, this is just a sidebar. Elliot, I think you had a question. Yes, okay. When you're at a conference like this and you have opportunity to talk to agents, like, don't follow them around, because she told this wonderful story about being chased into the bathroom to pitch while she was in the cubicle. And so, have some decorum, and also in your queries, know that there's a person on the other end, and Dear Michelle or Dear Nicole or Dear Erin really goes a long way. Elliot had a question.
Back to marketing for just a second. If your book comes out and you only have sort of a finite amount of money to spend on helping market your own book, you guys are talking about, a lot of it falls on the author, but those things can get quite expensive. If you only have a finite amount of money, where would you all recommend targeting that for your marketing? Is it getting your book on NetGalley? Is it Amazon ads? Is it going to conferences? Is it what would you all recommend if you only have a small pool of money to spend, where you can kind of get the most bang for your buck and trying to market yourself? And I know that probably depends on genre and all of that too, the book that you're trying to market, but what would you all recommend so that you're not spending yourself into oblivion with maybe not getting the results that you want?
So the question is, given that most writers probably don't have limitless budgets for marketing, what is the best way to get the bang for your buck in marketing?
So, we are literary agents. We're not marketing experts. As an author, I have tried a lot of those. I think really working on just building your readership is really the way to go. No one sells your book like readers. And I think getting that quality product out there is the main thing that you need to do. But then hosting things like book discussions, really getting the readers involved is where I would say to go. This is a lot of what, I've done a lot of, the ads, a lot of things have changed from when they first came out. So it's very hard to speak on that, and we're not marketing experts, but definitely building those relationships with your readers. So anywhere you go, conferences or whatever, constantly building your email list, because they still do open emails. As long as you're not spamming them with emails, they still will open your email. And so I think building that readership, hosting those book discussions, for example, I guess I'm on the old side, I guess, so Facebook, if you have your Facebook reading group saying I'm coming in to talk about the book, even if it's 5 or 6 readers, you do want devoted readers. And so I think building there is a way to go. And it's not that publishers do not do any marketing. It might just be the level of the marketing that you get. So making those efforts, really, if you're able to get signings into bookstores, and some teams will help with that. It just all depends. But you do have to put yourself out there, or this is where now your family member comes in handy. If you have your sister is the more vocal one, you can you call the stores for me and set this up? My sister has done that for me. And you go and it's really about slowly grassroots building your readership. It's my opinion. I'll let my colleagues chime in if they have anything else.
And that's also the thing about the internet today and social media. There's a lot of stuff you can do for free, and you can exchange with other debut authors and get them to, market your book while you market theirs.
Yes.
There's other things you can do. You could set up book giveaways. There are some publishers that will give you a few of your books for free, depending on the publisher. So you can use that to do book giveaways and discussions, things like that. I think that's basically what I was coming up with. Sorry.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that once you're working with a publisher, marketing and publicity departments are also stretched thin, just like editors are. From what I'm seeing, are providing increasingly less support, and more of the pressure is on the author to market themselves. But at the same time, I always encourage my clients to like be proactive with their own marketing and publicity teams. So like if they find a conference that would be really great for them to attend, or if they want to set up an event with a bookstore, do that and get in touch with your teams and say like, how can we make this the best situation it can be? So like they can help you get books, they might be able to help you send you like bookmarks or stickers or pens or something, or maybe they can like comp your trip to that conference if if the situation is, the timing is right and everything. So I think a lot of it is not waiting for them to send you things, but to also send them things and say like, hey, I set up a visit to a school, what can we do? Like, can we have materials for the kids or something like that? So I think it kind of, because their attention is pulled in so many directions, I think that's also well worth doing.
Yes.
And whether we're talking marketing or we're just talking about the community itself, remember that it's very much a give and take situation. So if you are supporting other authors with their books coming out, like, hey, happy pub day to this person, they're more likely to do that for you. If you're going to ask somebody to read your manuscript and offer you critique, then you need to be prepared to do the same to them. You cannot go forward with a plan of just having other people do the work for you. You have to be able to do it as well. All right, so I saw a bunch of hands go up. So I'm going to start left to right, and we're going to go over here with Catherine, and then we have one right here.
I was wondering if you talk a little bit about revise and resubmit. Do you guys ever offer that? Is it really worth it for authors to try to do that?
So this is a request from the agent for a revision and then resubmission. Is it worth it for the author to do that and get back to the agent, or should they move on?
So I do think it's worth it if an agent asks for that. And I'm going back to my example again. 15 agents and 14 tell you no, and one says revise and submit. I would say definitely go ahead and see. To me though, whether or not the agent accepts it after that, you've still worked on your product and made it better than it was before. A manuscript, I was talking about this, you picture it like peanuts, and you begin to crush that peanut, and the more that you keep crushing it, it'll become smooth like butter. So the more that you keep going at it, is the better that your manuscript will become, with the right guidance, of course, but it's the better that it will become. So it doesn't hurt you in the process, but it's not a guarantee. It is usually when an agent says that, they are interested. Otherwise, they will just say no. Or you do have some agents that do not answer you at all, So I would take it a little serious if they do say that.
Yes, I believe it's always worth it. I have taken on clients where I've given them a revise and resubmit, and then I ultimately signed with them. So it is very important to always be revising and resubmitting, and that's just something that you'll have to practice anyway, because your book will not be like perfect. You'll always have to do revisions. When you get to an editor, they're going to make you do revisions. So it's good to be able to practice that now, so that way you'll get in the habit for the future.
I would just add, well, personally, I don't really ask for revise and resubmits. I think I've only maybe done one ever. But for me, like, if I'm at the point of like making editorial notes and I want to send a letter to someone detailing those, I either want the project or I don't. So I really don't do them at all. Having said that, I think that they are worthwhile if the feedback resonates with you. Like, even speaking as like an agent sending projects to editors, we get revision requests from editors as well on our clients' books, and 2 of those might look completely different. And if it's something where you think, oh yeah, I could really see this like strengthening my manuscript, I would absolutely go for it. If it feels like you're getting this feedback in a vacuum and everyone else's feedback is not the same, maybe sit on that and think about whether you want to put the time in, because at the end of the day, it also is subjective, and that feedback might not be where you want to take your manuscript. So, I think there's a lot of things to weigh there.
Helen had a question.
So, I had my debut novel published by a small publisher and did not go through an agent. And thinking about my second novel, like, what do I need to say to the agent, and how many books do I have to have sold to impress you, or what's my next step for querying on my second book after the first book has been published by a small publisher?
Okay, so may end up mirroring the question we had earlier, but Helen's talking about having a book published through a small press, and what kind of sales numbers would be necessary for it to impress you, or grab your attention for another submission?
I'm interested in the project now. I'm interested in the premise and the book. That goes in your author bio. I've previously published with XYZ. Sometimes editors, if they're interested in your manuscript, they may ask how many you've sold. Sometimes they just want to know your publisher history. It just depends. It's all very subjective. It's good to mention because it just shows that you've gone through the process before and you know what it takes as far as editorial. But give me a good premise and a good manuscript.
Yeah, I don't really look at like number wise. I will, if there is a published book, I will go and see like if there's any reviews and what the reviews say. But that doesn't also like mean anything to me. Like if the book in front of me now is really good, then I'm going to sign it. It's not about past, it's about future for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm much more concerned about the book that I'm being pitched. I signed a client earlier this year who writes literary fiction, and her first book came out with a small press. And I went and read what it was about because I was interested, and because I always want to know, do their other ideas and other projects also line up with what I want to work on? And in this case, I loved the sound of her small press book, and I loved the premise of the book that she was pitching me, but I don't look at sales numbers or anything like that.
Yes, Clay.
You spoke about this earlier, but I'm curious if you can speak a little bit more to what's happening currently. What is the perfect storm of the industry and how it is shrinking, expanding, atrophying, evolving? Like what's going on?
That's a good question. A very general question that Clay has is what's up with the industry? I do want to actually add to that too, because I had a question about the big five being like the big dream that everybody has, but it feels like maybe in the industry that a lot of great material is now falling into mid and smaller presses, and is that something that an author should take into consideration? So I'm piggybacking that.
I think absolutely it's worth thinking about mid-size and smaller presses. I think that depending on what an agent represents, that this answer might look a little different for everybody. I'm saying that because I represent like a little, like things that are maybe a little weirder. I don't really do much commercial fiction at all, except in the middle grade space. And for me, the more literary end and things that are kind of stranger and more out of the box, what I've seen over the past few years is that publishers seem less willing to take a chance on something that feels new and different. There's a lot of like, I'm speaking for like current clients too that have had situations where like options have gotten dropped because projects weren't in alignment with a publisher's new mandate, which was go for big commercial books. Speaking for like the big five. And so I think that the risk taking that is really exciting to me is happening more in the mid-size and small press space. I'm really encouraged by new presses popping up, people trying new things. I think that this is a really like crucial time to like sort of try to subvert what is happening in Big Five, which there's lots of consolidation of houses, imprints are being closed, lots of layoffs. I don't know if, like how much anyone like reads publishing news, but like recently there was a big wave of like higher ups at some of the Big Five getting like forced retirement essentially, and you know, whether they will backfill jobs, you know, to lessen the workload of the remaining editors remains to be seen. Every editor I speak to is stretched very, very thin right now, and we're seeing a lot of editors leaving the industry as a result of just burnout, essentially. I realize that all sounds like super doom and gloom, and it does feel that way, honestly, a lot. Like, it's hard sometimes when you go like months and months and months and months and don't hear anything on a project. But I really do think that we're at this transitional time where I'm hoping really exciting things are going to come out of that, whether it's the mid-size and smaller publishers taking up a bigger chunk of space. You know, there's only so many massive 7-figure commercial sales I think that the Big Five can do, and those other books, like, there's still a demand for a mid-list author. And I think that you know, I'm just personally, again, speaking as someone that doesn't do commercial fiction, I'm seeing exciting stuff happen in the smaller and mid-sized space. So I always say that to like my clients when we're like putting submission lists together. I'm like, because Big Five is the dream, like you said, like it's where everyone wants to be, but sometimes you might get more attention, more marketing and publicity dollars at a smaller press because they just they might have less resources overall, but they might have more resources to devote to you. So I always say, like, not to discount those smaller presses.
Yeah, I believe the small and mid-sized publishers, they're more hungry now compared to Big Five. So I had talked to a mid-sized publisher, and they said they have Big Five energy. So it's good to consider them because they're gonna want to help you, you know, get to that, you know, Big Five dream, even if they're not, you know, that name brand that you've always dreamed of. So it's good to consider them and what they would offer. Like, ultimately, just because you have a Big Five, you know, deal doesn't mean it's the perfect deal for you. So also consider what they bring to the table, what the other publishers bring to the table, and ultimately what will benefit you in the long run.
Journey, and then we're going to come back to Kevin.
So, how much harder is it to get genre fiction featuring trans characters published in traditional Big Five publishing houses over cis characters?
Okay. So the question is, how difficult is it to get trans characters published in
genre fiction?
In genre fiction in the traditional publishing sense?
I think it ultimately just winds down to what an editor is looking for. So again, this is subjective. So if they're looking for that, then there won't be a hesitation. But if they're not, then there might be. It just depends on, you know, what is looking for. Like with fourth wing and like disability and stuff like that. Like normally before that wasn't a really thing to become popular, and now it is. So it just depends on the what people are looking for ultimately.
Yeah, I would add that, I mean, I certainly would not feel that it's prohibitive at all. If anything, most, the genres I work in, which is sort of speculative, so I work with, you know, sci-fi fantasy publishers and mystery and thriller, particularly like in the sci-fi fantasy space. They want more representation, not, you know, not less at this time. So yeah. Not prohibitive, definitely.
I mean, again, it just comes to good premise, great writing.
Give them a reason
Yeah.
to want to publish it. So yeah. Kelly.
Once you have published the book, how involved are you guys with the author?
Once the book is published, how involved are you with the author? I mean, this obviously not on projects going forward, but on that particular book.
Oh, on that particular
Right,
book.
correct.
I mean, there are things that we do. You know, those of us on we are on social media, so we're also, when the book comes out, we're also announcing it, and when the cover comes out, we're sharing it, and so we're doing things like that with a book that is currently published. But I'm more behind the scenes going, what else do you have? Let's start working on the next thing. That's kind of where my mind is.
Yeah, because basically once we sold it, our job is done. Like, I will agree with Michelle, like I'm, you know, making sure that, you know, I'm posting about the cover, you know, when it's released, but our job, we're not marketers, you know, in the end, our job is to sell the book. So once the book is sold, we're just working on selling the next book, so just keep writing.
Yeah, we're basically maybe helping you promote, making sure you get paid. That's a big thing to do.
Yes.
Checking in every royalty season to make sure that payments are coming, because that's not always something that happens. We do a lot of payment chasing, so that's something that happens like with your current previous books once, you know, those books are out. But I tell my clients, like, the best way I think to cope with submission waits is to start on a new project. So I mean, granted, like, life happens and not everyone dives right into a new project, but that's how I like to work with people. I want them to start working on something new, regardless of how long that might take. But I immediately start thinking about the next thing.
And to add on to what Erin said, like, one of the things when I have a call with a writer is to ask, not only talk about the current book, but also what are you working on next? Because, I mean, you don't have to have written it, but if you have like ideas, then it gets me, you know, thinking, okay, this person is in it for a career rather than just a one book deal.
Yes.
And it's not like you don't have other clients to work with too.
That too.
So there's that too. So we've got enough time for another couple questions, and then we've got one here, and then I'll find somebody out.
My question is kind of an idiosyncratic question, but like, what are your pet peeves that writers do when they're pitching or talking or working with you guys? Like, what are faux pas that, just like on a human level, that you're like,
What is on your do not do list?
Be argumentative. I've had, and they haven't even been clients, they were potential clients, but I would give them advice on what I would work on, and they were like, no, it's fine, it's the way it is. So then I'm like, well then why do you need me? So if you don't have that, you know, open mind for criticism, then that is definitely a pet peeve of mine, because like editors are going to have you know, critique stuff. They might change the title, they might change a lot of the things that you might love. So if you can't handle that, then that's not going to get you very far.
I don't know if I call these pet peeves or faux pas, but something that I notice a lot is there's no other book like this in the world. That I'm like, well, you know, that makes me go, did you do your research? Because we want to be able to. There's no bookshelf where it's just going to be your book sitting there. So you gotta know where your book is going to fall, and and I think that I've seen a lot of that. There's none like this, and I also, it's not really a pet peeve, but I like authors who read. It sounds funny, but there are a lot of authors who have said to me, I don't have time to read because I'm writing. And that's like a little thing for me. I'm like, if you want people to read your book, you need to read other people's books, And so I think that you have to read in the genre that you want to write. I think that's really important, and you can tell sometimes.
This isn't really like a pet peeve, but it's something that I notice a lot in pitches, both like in-person pitching and in query letters, is that when they're pitching their book, an author will often spend more time talking about the premise than what the book is about. So they will often spend a lot of time on my book is about, and talk about like the characters and like the world and when we are, and like maybe they get up to the inciting incident and then they stop. But I think it's really crucial for a good pitch to like talk about what happens after that. You don't need to give the whole plot of the book, but you want to go past the inciting incident. Like, I want to know what the stakes are for your character, what are the stakes of their journey, both internal and external. And I think a lot of people just sort of say, this is the premise, and then stop. So it's like, I do a lot of going, what happens after that? Because that's when, like, where does the plot go is a very important part of the pitch. Because often I find when I say, like, how much of the book did you just tell me about? Well, it's just like the first 20 pages or something. It's like, no, you need to really get into the meat of the plot when you're pitching your book.
I do feel like sessions like this need to come with their own glossary, whether we're talking about IP or comp titles or inciting event. There are a lot of things you have to learn, terms you have to learn, inciting event being a very important one in storytelling. So if you have those questions on anything that you've heard today, and you can drop them in the mentoring session or ask us, we'll be happy to help you with. So we got time for one more question, and we'll bring it right here.
Okay, so this is one more IP related question, specifically with adaptations and like merchandise rights and stuff like that. So if a publisher, like for example, like let's say a publisher like agrees to publish my book, like how likely is it that the author retains enough rights to the IP that say, what if I wanted to code say a little independent video game or something and put it on my website that's a tie-in to the book? Is that something that I could typically do, or is that something that I'd have to run by the publisher? Is that how much control does the publisher get?
I know most of this is going to be addressed in your contract, but it's a rights question. It's a rights question about what can the author do once they have the publishing deal and the book is in the publisher's hands. Can they do their own video game, or can they do other projects with
it? The way I kind of generally approach it is, the publisher will try to keep whatever rights they can, always, and I will try to keep whatever rights I can. So, if I know that something is particularly important to an author, like you said, video games, if you really want to keep rights like that, then I know what to fight for hardest. But I always try to keep audio, I always try to keep film and TV, whether a publisher will bend on those things is a totally different story. It's different for every single book, how much they're willing to let you keep. But yeah, it's really just a negotiation question, and that would be something that you would need to make sure your agent knows, hey, I would really love to do this, or try to sell this, who knows, maybe you could even try to sell that on your own. But yeah, it's all comes down to the negotiation process and what the publisher's willing to like give.
This is where it is very advantageous to have a literary agent because they can deal with these contract issues and negotiate on your behalf, whereas if you don't and you're dealing with a smaller press or somebody that you can bypass an agent with, you have to understand contract law or have somebody in your corner that does to be able to negotiate these things for you. But I know we can do this all day because we all have questions, and I'm sure at some point in time their heads will hit the table, but they'll try to answer. But we're done here, we're out of time, and we need to take a break before the next session starts and before our one-on-one mentoring sessions start at 10:30. So thank you all, and thank you Nicole, Erin, and Michelle.